Captain Ji-hoon Kim pressed his palms against the cold metal railing of the bridge, feeling the subtle vibrations that ran through the Resilience's hull. The ship groaned softly around him, a constant reminder of its patchwork construction. Through the main view screen, the approaching Valdorian fleet looked like a constellation of deadly stars, each vessel gleaming with polished armor and perfect geometric lines. "Sir, they're beautiful," whispered pilot Hannah Cho from her station, her voice carrying a mix of admiration and dread. "Look at those ships, every surface is flawless." Ji-hoon nodded grimly. The Valdorian dreadnoughts stretched for kilometers, their hulls reflecting the light of distant stars like mirrors. Elegant weapon arrays dotted their sides in perfect symmetry, and their engines burned with clean blue fire that left no exhaust trails. These were ships built by a civilization that had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. In contrast, the Resilience looked like exactly what it was, a desperate gamble held together by human stubbornness. Welding scars crisscrossed the hull where salvaged plates had been fused together. Mismatched components jutted out at odd angles, and the ship's asymmetrical design made it look more like a flying junkyard than a vessel of exploration. "Incoming transmission," Communications Officer Mina Park announced, her fingers dancing, across a console that sparked occasionally. The communication array had been salvaged from 3 different ships, and keeping it functional required constant adjustment. Engineer Seok Lee looked up from his station where he'd been monitoring the ship's countless jury-rig systems. "Audio and visual are stable, Captain. The signal's coming through their diplomatic channels." The main screen flickered, displaying static for a moment before resolving into the image of Admiral Thexmore. The Valdorian commander was an imposing figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with scales that shifted from deep purple to silver in the light. His forearms moved with predatory grace, and his elongated skull housed eyes that glowed with intelligence and contempt. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was a marvel of alien engineering. Smooth surfaces curved seamlessly into one another, and holographic displays floated in mid-air without any visible projectors. The crew moved with mechanical precision, their scaled bodies encased in form-fitting armor that pulsed with energy conduits. "Greetings, humans," Thexmore's voice boomed. Through the speakers, each word carefully pronounced. "I am Admiral Thexmore of the Valdorian Imperial Navy, commander of the 47th Conquest Fleet." His eyes swept across the human bridge, visible through the transmission, taking in every detail. Ji-hoon could see the alien's expression shift from formal protocol to barely contained amusement as he observed their makeshift equipment and cramped quarters. "Is this truly the best that Earth can offer?" Thexmore continued, his voice rising with incredulous laughter. "A flying scrapyard held together with hope and desperation. My engineers assure me that your vessel should not be capable of spaceflight, yet here you drift before us like cosmic debris." Weapons specialist Taemin Yu's hand moved instinctively toward his control panel, but Ji-hoon caught his eye and shook his head slightly. Around the bridge, the tension was palpable. Systems analyst Jisoo Lim hunched over her screens, her fingers flying across keyboards that had been cobbled together from a dozen different manufacturers. "We represent Earth's first deep space exploration vessel," Ji-hoon replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. Behind him, he could hear the subtle hum of overtaxed power systems and the occasional pop of electrical components pushed beyond their design limits. Thexmore's laughter filled the bridge, a sound like grinding metal mixed with wind chimes. "Exploration? You pathetic scavengers couldn't explore your way out of a meteor field. Look at yourselves. Your ship is constructed from the discarded refuse of a dozen civilizations. Your equipment is obsolete technology that we abandoned centuries ago." The Admiral gestured to his pristine bridge, where crew members worked at consoles that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. "This is what true spacefaring capability looks like. This is the product of 10,000 years of technological advancement." Seok's jaw clenched visibly, and Ji-hoon could see similar reactions across his crew, but they held their positions, understanding that their captain had a plan, even if they couldn't see it yet. "The Valdorian Empire has monitored your species for decades," Thexmore continued, his tone shifting to something resembling pity. "You scurry about the galaxy's edge, picking through the ruins left by your betters. You cobble together ships from scrap and call it progress. You are not explorers. You are cosmic scavengers unworthy of the space you occupy. The transmission zoomed out slightly, revealing more of the Imperial bridge. Ji-hoon could see tactical displays showing the positions of over 200 Valdorian warships, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. The Empire demands Earth's immediate and unconditional surrender, Thexmore declared, his arms spreading wide in a gesture of absolute authority. You have 72 standard hours to broadcast your submission across all frequencies. If you refuse, we will reduce your pitiful world to ash and scatter your species to the void. The Admiral leaned forward, his glowing eyes boring into the camera. Consider this a mercy, humans. We could destroy you now, but the Empire prefers to offer civilization to lesser species. Submit, and you will serve as workers in our great projects. Refuse, and you will simply cease to exist. The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge of the Resilience in heavy silence. The only sounds were the ship's constant mechanical symphony, cooling fans, humming processors, and the occasional groan of stressed metal. The Valdorian fleet hung in space like a deadly constellation, their perfect formations maintaining position with mathematical precision. Admiral Thexmore's flagship pulsed with energy as scanning beams swept across the human vessel, analyzing every rivet and weld. The aliens were so confident in their superiority that they hadn't even bothered to raise their shields. Inside the Resilience, Captain Ji-hoon Kim moved through corridors that looked like they'd been assembled by mad engineers. Pipes of different materials and colors ran along the ceiling, secured with whatever brackets the crew could find. The walls were a patchwork of hull plates from dozens of different ships, creating a rainbow of metals that told the story of humanity's scavenging across the galaxy. Conference in Engineering Bay 3, Ji-hoon announced over the ship's internal comm system. All senior staff, 5 minutes. The engineering section was barely large enough for the 6 officers to stand comfortably. Around them, the ship's vital systems hummed and clicked with sounds that would have terrified most spacers, but to the crew of the Resilience, these were the familiar voices of their mechanical family. Engineer Seok Lee stood beside what looked like a completely random collection of salvaged hull plating. The metal sheets were different colors, thicknesses, and compositions, bolted together with mismatched fasteners that created an ugly but functional wall. "They see scrap," Seok said, running his calloused hands along the surface. "But watch this." He pressed his palm against a section that looked identical to the rest. Suddenly, the entire wall came alive with soft blue light as hidden circuits activated throughout the metal. "Every piece serves 3 different functions," he continued, with growing excitement. "This plate here, it's hull armor, a circuit board, and a heat distributor for the fusion reactor. That section over there is structural support, a sensor array, and part of our artificial gravity generator." Pilot Hana Cho moved to what appeared to be a simple maintenance panel near the floor. The cover was dented and scarred, held in place by tape and hope. But when she pressed her thumb against a hidden scanner, the crude exterior folded away like flower petals, revealing sophisticated holographic displays that filled the air with 3-dimensional star charts. "Remember that derelict Altarian cruiser we found drifting near the Vega system?" she asked, her fingers dancing through the floating displays. "Everyone thought we were crazy for spending 3 weeks cutting it apart, but their navigation system was still intact." The holographic display zoomed in on their current position, showing the Valdorian fleet in perfect detail. But more impressive were the layers of information flowing across the screen. Energy signatures, communication frequencies, even the molecular composition of the enemy ship's armor. "We didn't just install their nav system," Hana continued. "We integrated it into our hull sensors, our communication array, even our life support monitors. The Altarians were paranoid about being tracked, so their technology can analyze anything within 1,000 kilometers and tell you what it had for breakfast." Systems analyst Jisoo Lim pulled out a tablet that looked like it had survived several explosions. The screen was cracked, the casing was held together with industrial adhesive, and half the buttons had been replaced with components from different devices. But when she activated it, the device projected a complete schematic of the Resilience into the air above them. "Sir, all modifications are ready," she reported, manipulating the hologram to show cross-sections of the ship. "Remember that mining disaster at the Kepler station 2 years ago? The explosion that killed 300 miners?" The others nodded grimly. The Kepler incident had been a tragedy that made headlines across human space. The quantum resonance chambers from their deep core equipment survived the blast, Jisoo continued. Everyone assumed they were too damaged to be useful, but quantum resonance doesn't care about a few dents and scratches. She highlighted several sections of the ship, where the salvage chambers had been installed. "We've reconfigured them to work with our power grid. Each chamber can store enough energy to power a small city, and they can release it all at once without any warning signatures." Weapons specialist Taemin Yu had been quiet during the briefings, but now he moved to what looked like a simple cargo bay door. The metal surface was scarred and unpainted, with hydraulic systems that appeared to have been cobbled together from construction equipment. "You all remember that interesting salvage run we made through the Kronos debris field 6 months ago?" he asked with a grin that promised explosive surprises. "Officially, we were looking for rare metals. Unofficially..." He placed his hand on a scanner that had been disguised as a simple pressure plate. The cargo bay door split open, but instead of revealing an empty storage compartment, hidden weapon systems emerged from concealed compartments throughout the ship. Plasma cannons, railguns, and missile launchers unfolded like mechanical flowers, their targeting systems already tracking the Valdorian fleet. "Those Valdorian plasma cannons we found floating in space." Taemin's grin widened. "Turns out they fell off a transport during a battle. The Empire wrote them off as lost, but we've been reverse engineering them ever since. They're now part of our defensive grid, along with weapons from 6 other species." Communications Officer Mina Park looked up from her station, where she'd been monitoring the enemy fleet's transmissions. Her equipment looked like it had been assembled from spare parts found in 100 different junkyards, but the data flowing across her screens was more detailed than anything the Valdorian military possessed. "Captain, the beacon network is fully active," she reported. "Every piece of debris we've been dropping during our week-long approach is now online and transmitting." She activated a display that showed the space around both fleets. What had appeared to be random space junk scattered across several cubic kilometers was actually a carefully positioned network of sensors, transmitters, and something much more dangerous. Each beacon contains salvaged components from 18 different civilizations, Mina explained. Cytherian cloaking devices, Centauri quantum communicators, even some Valdorian shield generators we acquired through various means. They've been analyzing enemy ship configurations, recording their communication protocols, and mapping their defensive systems. Captain Ji-hoon Kim stood in the center of his officers, looking at the evidence of months of careful preparation. Every salvaged component, every seemingly random repair, every piece of junk they'd collected during their journey had been part of a larger plan. "Gentleman, lady," he said quietly, "the Valdorians see a ship held together with desperation and hope. They're not entirely wrong. But what they don't understand is that desperation breeds innovation, and hope gives us the courage to attempt the impossible." He gestured to the weapon systems, the hidden technology, the carefully orchestrated deception that surrounded them. "They have superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and centuries of military experience. But we have something they lost long ago, the ability to look at broken things and see possibilities instead of problems." The ship around them hummed with barely contained energy, every salvage system working in harmony, despite their mismatched origins. Outside, the Valdorian fleet continued their scans, confident that they understood exactly what they were facing. Then, "It's time to show them what human ingenuity can accomplish," Ji-hoon concluded, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone about to spring the perfect trap. The Eternal Dominion carved through space like a blade of pure destruction, its massive hull stretching nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Admiral Thexmore stood on the command deck, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the pathetic human vessel grow larger on the main display. Around him, 200 of the Empire's finest warships maintained perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to deliver swift annihilation. The bridge was a masterpiece of Valdorian engineering, with curved surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Holographic displays floated in the air without visible projectors, and the crew moved with mechanical precision at stations that responded to the slightest touch. Everything was clean, efficient, and absolutely perfect. Sensor Officer Vextal monitored his console with the bored attention of someone performing a routine task. The human ship registered as barely more than space debris on their advanced scanners. Its energy signature was chaotic, its structure was compromised in 17 different places, and its weapon systems appeared to consist of mining equipment and improvised explosive devices. "Admiral," Vextal reported in a monotone voice, "the human vessel continues to broadcast standard diplomatic frequencies. No sign of additional ships or defensive installations." Thexmore's scaled lips curled into what might have been a smile. "Maintain current approach vector. Ready the demonstration charges. I want their planet to witness the destruction of their so-called exploration vessel before we begin the bombardment." But then, something impossible happened. Vextal's console erupted in alarms and warning lights. The Valdorian officer's eyes widened as data streams cascaded across his displays faster than he could process them. His hands moved frantically over the controls, trying to make sense of readings that defied everything he understood about physics and military tactics. "Admiral?" Vextal's voice cracked with disbelief. "We're detecting multiple contacts. The human scrap ship appears to have multiplied." The main viewer shifted automatically, showing the space around the Imperial fleet. Where moments before there had been empty void punctuated by distant stars, now dozens of vessels filled the darkness. Ship after ship materialized from nowhere, each one identical to the ramshackle Resilience. They appeared in perfect formation, surrounding the Valdorian Armada in a sphere of cobbled-together metal and desperate human engineering. "Impossible," Thexmore snarled, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of absolute rejection. "Humans lack the industrial capacity for such construction. Our intelligence reports show they possess fewer than 50 deep space vessels in their entire fleet." The bridge fell into stunned silence as more ships continued to appear. Each new vessel looked exactly like the original, the same patchwork hull plating, the same mismatched components jutting out at odd angles, the same overall appearance of barely controlled chaos held together by stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "Sir?" Vextal's voice wavered as he struggled to interpret his sensor readings. "Our scanners are showing inconsistent data. Some of these vessels register as solid matter with standard mass and energy signatures, but others are reading as something else entirely. The computer can't classify what it's detecting." Navigation Officer Keithrell looked up from her station, confusion clear in her glowing eyes. "Admiral, some of these ships are occupying the same spatial coordinates as others. That should be physically impossible unless—" She trailed off as the implications hit her. Around the bridge, other officers were beginning to understand what they were witnessing. The perfect Valdorian military formation was now trapped inside a cage of human vessels that shouldn't exist, but somehow did. Suddenly, every communication frequency on every ship in the Imperial fleet crackled to life simultaneously. "Captain?" Jahun Kim's voice echoed through 200 bridge speakers at once, his words carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had just sprung the perfect trap. "Admiral Thexmore," Kim's voice was calm and almost conversational, "you called us scavengers during our last conversation. You were absolutely right about that. We do scavenge everything we can find drifting in the void." On the Eternal Dominions. Bridge Communications Officer Zektor frantically worked at his console, trying to block the transmission. But the human signal was coming through every system simultaneously. Tactical displays, environmental controls, even the food synthesizers were broadcasting Kim's words. "We scavenge hull plating from derelict ships," Kim continued. "We scavenge weapons from battle sites. We scavenge navigation systems from abandoned stations. But most importantly, Admiral, we scavenge technology from species who think they're superior to us." Thexmore's scales shifted from their normal purple-silver to a darker, more agitated pattern. His forearms clenched into fists as he realized the full implications of what he was hearing, including Valdorian communication protocols, shield frequencies and weapons signatures, Kim added, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. Did you really think we spent 6 months analyzing that space junk without learning anything useful? The truth dawned on Thexmore like a supernova explosion in his mind. The Imperial fleet had been scanning the human ship for weeks, confident in their technological superiority. But while they were analyzing the resilience, the humans had been analyzing them right back. Sir, Vextal's voice rose to near panic. The fleet around us is beginning to shimmer. Some vessels are maintaining solid mass readings, but others are shifting between matter and energy states. On the main viewer, the impossible human fleet began to reveal its true nature. Half the ships flickered like mirages, their hulls becoming translucent before solidifying again. These were sophisticated holographic projections, powered by the network of beacons the humans had been secretly deploying during their approach. But the other half remained stubbornly, dangerously real. These ships had been hiding in the asteroid belt beyond the system's edge, their energy signatures masked by human-modified Valdorian stealth technology. The same stealth systems the Empire used to hide their own scout vessels had been reverse-engineered, improved, and turned against them. You walked into our scrapyard, Admiral, Kim's voice continued, now carrying an edge of satisfaction that made Thexmore's blood run cold. And now you're part of our collection. The holographic ships began to fade, but their purpose had been served. They had created confusion, divided the Imperial fleet's attention, and masked the approach of the real human vessels. The Valdorian formation, designed to maximize firepower against targets in front of them, was now surrounded by enemies on all sides. Weapons Officer Drakmor looked up from his console, his scaled features pale with realization. Admiral, we're completely surrounded. The human ships have us in a perfect sphere formation. Every one of our vessels is targeted by at least 3 enemy ships. But the most terrifying realization was yet to come. As the holographic projections faded completely, Thexmore could see the real human ships clearly for the first time. They still looked like flying junkyards, still appeared to be held together by desperation and hope. But now he could see the subtle modifications, the hidden weapon ports, the energy signatures that had been masked by their chaotic appearance. The humans hadn't just built a fleet of scrap ships, they had built a fleet of perfectly disguised predators, each one designed to look helpless while hiding enough firepower to challenge vessels 10 times their size. How? Thexmore whispered, his voice barely audible over the bridge's emergency alarms. Kim's answer came through every speaker in the Imperial fleet simultaneously, his words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Because while you were building perfect ships for perfect battles, we were building imperfect ships for impossible victories. The silence of space shattered as the first human ship opened fire. The Defiance unleashed a barrage that should have been impossible. Mining lasers designed to cut through asteroids, plasma cannons stolen from Valdorian supply convoys, and kinetic rounds fired from what looked like modified construction equipment. The combination of weapons created a light show that painted the void in brilliant colors. Admiral Thexmore watched in stunned disbelief as his flagship's shields flared under the assault. The Eternal Dominion had weathered attacks from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, but this chaotic mix of improvised weapons was somehow penetrating defenses that had never failed before. All ships return fire, Thexmore commanded, his forearms gesturing frantically at the tactical display. Focus targeting on the largest human vessels, but the human ships were already moving, and they moved like nothing the Valdorian computers had ever seen. The Resilience suddenly twisted into a corkscrew spin that should have torn apart any vessel not built in a proper shipyard. Instead, it accelerated through the maneuver, slipping between 2 massive Imperial dreadnoughts like a fish swimming through coral. On the bridge of the Resilience, pilot Hannah Cho's hands flew across controls that sparked and smoked under the strain. Her salvaged Altarian navigation system was processing movement patterns from 17 different species, simultaneously, creating flight paths that no single civilization's tactical computers could predict. They can't track us, she shouted over the sound of overtaxed engines and creaking hull plates. Their targeting systems are designed for conventional flight patterns, but we're using Catherian evasion protocols mixed with Zentori attack runs, and good old human stubbornness. The resilience dove beneath a Valdorian cruiser, its hull scraping against the enemy's shields in a maneuver that violated every rule of space combat. As it passed, hidden weapon ports opened along the human ship's belly, releasing a swarm of improvised missiles that had been disguised as external fuel tanks. Engineer Seok Lee was performing miracles in the ship's engine room, rerouting power. Through systems that had never been designed to work together, sparks flew from jury-rigged connections as he pushed every salvaged component beyond its safety limits. Kepler mining lasers drawing power from the Valdorian plasma core, he reported, sweat streaming down his face as he manually adjusted connections that were glowing white-hot. Human electromagnetic pulse generators running through the Centauri power distribution grid. Everything's holding together, but I can't promise for how long. The mining lasers were designed to cut through solid rock, but when powered by military-grade plasma cores, they became something entirely different. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the resilience, slicing through Valdorian armor plating like it was made of paper. Around them, the other human ships were performing their own impossible dances of destruction. The Perseverance had somehow inverted its hull configuration, turning its cargo bays into missile launchers and its docking ports into plasma cannon emplacements. The ship looked even more chaotic than before, but it was tearing through Imperial formations like a mechanical shark. The Retribution had gone completely silent on all frequencies, but its actions spoke louder than words. The ship had somehow cloaked itself using a combination of Altarian stealth technology and human improvisation, becoming a ghost that appeared only long enough to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. Weapons specialist Taemin Yu was coordinating the assault from his jury-rigged combat station, his voice crackling across encrypted channels that the Valdorians couldn't intercept. All ships, focus fire on their shield generators. Use the mining equipment first. It's designed to cut through the heaviest materials in the galaxy. The human ships moved with coordination that defied their ramshackle appearance. Each vessel seemed to know exactly where the others would be, allowing them to execute complex maneuvers that caught the Imperial fleet completely off guard. It was like watching a pack of wolves hunt, each member playing their part in bringing down prey much larger than themselves. "How are they doing this?" demanded Navigation Officer Kethrall from her station on the Eternal Dominion. "Our computers show 17 different ship types, each using completely different technologies." The answer came as the Resilience performed another impossible maneuver, sliding sideways through space in a move that should have been physically impossible. But the human ship's salvaged Altarian gravity generators were working in harmony with repurposed Valdorian inertial dampeners, creating artificial physics that bent the rules of space combat. A Valdorian heavy cruiser exploded in a brilliant fireball as the Defiance struck its reactor core with a precisely aimed mining laser. The Imperial ship had been designed to withstand attacks from conventional weapons, but the humans were using tools meant for industrial construction as instruments of war. "Sir!" Sensor Officer Vextal's voice rose to near panic as he watched his displays. "The human ships are switching weapon configurations in real time. Every time our computers adapt to their attack patterns, they're using completely different systems." It was true. The humans would attack with mining lasers until the Valdorian shields adapted, then switch to plasma cannons. When those became less effective, they'd use kinetic weapons or electromagnetic pulse generators. Each ship was like a Swiss Army knife of destruction, capable of switching between dozens of different attack modes. The Perseverance demonstrated this versatility by transforming its hull configuration mid-battle. External plates shifted and rotated, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden beneath layers of seemingly random armor. What had appeared to be a cargo hauler suddenly bristled with enough firepower to challenge a battleship. Taemin's voice crackled across the human fleet's communications. "Target their command ships. Use their own weapons against them. They built these plasma cannons. They should know how effective they are." The irony wasn't lost on Admiral Thexmore, as his own weapons technology was turned against his fleet. The humans had somehow reverse-engineered Valdorian plasma cannons and integrated them into their chaotic weapon systems, but they weren't using the weapons according to standard Imperial doctrine. They were using them in ways that the original designers had never imagined. "They're not following any recognizable tactical pattern," reported Weapons Officer Drakmore, his scaled hands trembling as he tried to coordinate the Imperial response. "Every ship is acting independently, but they're still working together. Perfectly." The human ships moved through the Imperial formation like schools of predatory fish, striking without warning and disappearing before effective counterattacks could be launched. The Retribution materialized behind a Valdorian destroyer, unleashed a devastating barrage from weapons that shouldn't have been able to fit in its hull, then vanished again before return fire could find its target. Admiral Thexmore watched, his perfect fleet being systematically destroyed by vessels that looked like flying junkyards. His scales had darkened to deep black, a sign of extreme stress that his bridge crew had never seen before. Around him, status reports painted a picture of impossible defeat. "Sir," Vextal reported quietly, "we've lost 37 ships in the Yar." First 10 minutes of combat. The humans are targeting our most critical systems with surgical precision. But what terrified Thexmore most wasn't the losses. It was the realization of what he was truly facing. These weren't desperate scavengers fighting with improvised weapons. These were apex predators who had spent years studying every species in the galaxy, learning their strengths and weaknesses, and turning that knowledge into the perfect hunting strategy. "They're not just scavengers," he whispered to his bridge crew, his voice barely audible over the sounds of battle raging around. They're apex predators disguised as scavengers. The humans had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength, using their apparent inferiority to lull their enemies into fatal overconfidence. The void around Earth had become a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Valdorian dreadnoughts that had once been the pride of an empire now floated as broken hulks, their perfect geometric hulls split open like cracked eggs. Atmosphere leaked from breached compartments in glittering streams of frozen vapor, creating ghostly trails that caught the light of distant stars. Admiral Thexmore's flagship, the mighty Eternal Dominion, drifted helplessly through the debris field. The 5-kilometer vessel that had led 200 ships to Earth's destruction now limped through space with its engines dark and its hull breached in over 40 places. Emergency lights flickered through the tears in its armor, revealing the chaos within. On the bridge, the once pristine command center was a wreck of sparking consoles and emergency alarms. Half the crew stations were offline, their elegant holographic displays replaced by smoke and the acrid smell of burning electronics. The remaining officers worked frantically at backup systems, trying to keep their ship from joining the growing cloud of debris, sir, Navigation Officer Kethrol reported, her voice strained with exhaustion and defeat. "We have minimal power to life support. The humans' electromagnetic pulse weapons have fried most of our primary systems. We're running on emergency batteries that have maybe 6 hours of power remaining." Thexmore stood in the center of his ruined bridge, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. His scales had turned completely black, a sign of stress so severe that several younger crew members had never seen it before. Around him, the evidence of humanity's impossible victory was displayed on every functioning screen. Of the 200 ships that had arrived with such confidence, fewer than 30 remained operational. Most of those were barely spaceworthy, limping away from the battle zone with critical systems failing and crews in emergency suits patching hull breaches with whatever materials they could find. Suddenly, every functional communication system on every surviving Valdorian ship crackled to life simultaneously. The transmission that came through was crystal clear, as if the humans' jury-rigged communication equipment was somehow more advanced than the Empire's finest technology. Captain Ji-Hoon Kim appeared on the screens, standing calmly on the bridge of the Resilience. Behind him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency at their salvaged consoles, as if the complete destruction of a galactic superpower's armada was just another day at the office. Engineer Seok Lee was already cataloging usable components from the wreckage, his tablet displaying a list of Valdorian technology that would soon be integrated into human ships. Advanced shield generators, quantum computers, artificial gravity systems, all of it would be stripped from the defeated vessels and repurposed for humanity's growing fleet. Pilot Hana Cho worked at her navigation station, plotting intercept courses for the fleeing Imperial vessels. Her salvaged Altarian systems were tracking every surviving ship, calculating their escape routes and fuel consumption with mathematical precision. None of them would make it to the system's edge without Human Permission Communications Officer Mina Park prepared to broadcast their victory across every known frequency in the galaxy. The message would reach every civilization, every species, every corner of known space within hours. The Valdorian Empire's humiliation would become the stuff of legend. "Admiral," Kim said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute victory, "you called us scavengers during our first meeting. You were absolutely right about that assessment. We are scavengers, and we're very good at what we do." His tone was conversational, almost friendly, but there was steel beneath the words. "We take what others discard and make it better than it ever was before. We take what others consider broken and turn it into something that would terrify them, in their nightmares." Behind Kim, systems analyst Jisoo Lim worked at her cracked tablet, coordinating salvage operations across the human fleet. Already, smaller vessels were moving through the debris field, cutting apart Valdorian hulls and extracting anything that might be useful. Weapons, engines, computers, even basic structural materials, nothing would be wasted. Thexmore's scaled. Features had gone pale beneath their black stress coloration. His glowing eyes were wide, with the kind of shock that comes from watching everything you believed about the universe proven wrong in the span of a few hours. Around him, his surviving bridge crew worked frantically to keep their ship functional. Emergency repair crews sealed atmosphere leaks with whatever materials they could find. Medical teams treated casualties in corridors filled with smoke and floating debris. The proud Valdorian military machine had been reduced to desperate improvisation. Exactly the kind of desperate improvisation that humans had mastered long ago. "This is our message to the Valdorian Empire, and any other galactic power that thinks humanity is weak," Kim continued, his image perfectly clear despite being broadcast through salvaged equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum. The human captain gestured slightly, and the camera pulled back to show more of the Resilience's bridge. The jury-rigged consoles, the mismatched components, the chaotic appearance that had fooled an entire armada, all of it was revealed as a masterpiece of deception and engineering. "We are the species that turns scrap into starships and mockery into motivation," Kim declared. "We don't just survive whatever you throw at us. We take your best technology, improve it in ways you never imagined, and use it to defeat you so completely that you'll spend generations trying to understand how it happened." Weapons specialist Taemin Yu looked up from his console where he was already analyzing the performance of their improvised weapon systems. Every shot fired, every target hit, every tactical decision was being recorded and studied. The next time humanity fought, they would be even more dangerous. "Your plasma cannons that we found floating in space?" Kim smiled slightly. "They're 30% more efficient now. Your shield generators that were salvaged from derelict ships, they can now adapt to 17 different types of energy weapons. Your stealth technology that we discovered in abandoned installations, we've improved it so much that your own sensors can't detect it." The transmission seemed to zoom in slightly, focusing on Kim's face. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes held the quiet confidence of someone who had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "Every piece of technology you've ever lost, every component you've ever discarded, every system you've ever considered obsolete, we've been watching, learning, and improving. While you built perfect ships for perfect battles, we were building adaptive ships for impossible victories." The camera pulled back again, showing the entire human bridge crew working with practiced efficiency. They moved like a team that had trained together for years, each person knowing exactly what the others needed before they asked for it. "And now," Kim concluded, "every species in the galaxy will know that humanity doesn't conquer. We adapt. We don't destroy, we repurpose. We don't rule through fear, we survive through innovation. The transmission ended, leaving the Valdorian survivors in stunned silence. Admiral Thexmore activated his personal communicator with trembling hands, sending what he knew would be his final report to the Empire. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, but perhaps his warning could prevent other civilizations from making the same fatal mistake. "Do not underestimate the humans," he transmitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "They are not primitives playing with advanced technology. They are innovators who turn every disadvantage into a weapon. What we thought was their weakness was actually our greatest threat." In the distance, the human fleet had already begun. The methodical process of salvaging every useful component from the battle. The Valdorian Empire's mightiest armada would become raw materials for Earth's next generation of vessels, their advanced technology integrated into humanity's growing arsenal of adaptive ships. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors seeking dominion, but as something far more dangerous. Survivors who could turn any enemy's strength against them, scavengers who could transform defeat into victory, and innovators who could take the galaxy's cast-offs and forge them into instruments of impossible triumph. The end.